Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the stream today. Today we have Brian Hogg. Sorry if I said your last name wrong. I have a hard to pronounce last name too. He is the founder of the Tech Stack Playbook, and he is also an AWS DevTools hero. All around great, smart guy. And today he's going to talk about serverless and generative AI. I believe there's going to be some bedrock in there. So really excited to explore this. Let's get Brian up here. Hey, Brian, how are you today?
Hey, Danielle, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the Believe in Serverless stream. I feel like I've low-key wanted to be on the stream for a while, so I'm so excited. This is gonna be great.
Awesome. Yeah, we're really excited to have you. So it goes both ways.
Awesome.
As always, if you have questions in the chat, definitely feel free to ask them. Were you going to answer them in real time, Brian, or should we do it at the end?
Yeah, let's do in real time. I feel like if I have the chat open, I think. But if I probably miss something, which I probably will, you could definitely just key me in and be like, "Hey, Brian, answer this question," and then I'll do that.
Sounds perfect. Yeah, awesome.
All right, cool.
Let's get your let's get your screen up here. If you got a screen to share here.
So let me get my windows up. I think what I'll do is I'll share my whole window, and that way I don't need to context switch.
Cool.
I'm using all of my brain today to make those decisions. So
yeah, and if something looks off, I can interrupt you. All right, I think I'm seeing it here. Yeah, looks good to me. Cool. Yeah, let me know if you need me on stage. Otherwise, I'll be watching you.
Okay, cool. I feel like I always need you on stage, but you're welcome to pop in if you want. Okay, cool. Well, hey everybody, for tuning into this live stream. We're going to be talking about the hidden power of serverless in your Gen AI applications and how to unlock that hidden power. And I have been doing a lot of very heavily containerized AI work and then serverless work. And I've definitely been learning a lot about specifically costs and how much the ceiling can actually be. So I'm definitely happy to talk about that as well if anybody's really curious, because there's a lot of great implementations for going in different paths. And I feel like the serverless path is always what I start out with, 10 out of 10. I'm always trying to implement something in a serverless way before I'm trying to make it more complicated or containerize something. So yeah, that's where we'll be diving into all that today. So my name is Brian Huff, and yeah, I also have a difficult last name as well. So it's good to always have somebody that can empathize with that struggle. But yeah, my name is Brian, and I'm an AWS DevTools hero. I was previously an AWS Community Builder. So big shout out to any builders that are out there. I built the Tech Stack Playbook kind of as this YouTube experiment during the pandemic, and then I started building a company around it, and then now it's an agency, and I also make a lot of courses on tech, and also it's a community as well. And I got into tech through doing hackathons. So a lot of where my motivation comes from learning new services and new tools is through building. And I think that that's something where if you've ever been thinking about serverless or AWS or cloud or just what's this AI or ChatGPT thing, I just think getting into the development is one of the best things you can do. And I did that a lot through learning in public. So I've done a lot of speaking across the country, and I do a lot of work that mainly is full stack cloud. I'd say that now a lot of times it's much more back end focused. So building servers, solution architecting, if that's a word, but building solutions in the cloud and just seeing how much I can learn, how much I can build. So that's a little bit about me and my motivation. So I don't know if anybody is like streaming slash commenting and they're like able to participate. I don't know like how this would work, but I was just curious if anybody has heard about Amazon Bedrock. And if you have, you could like comment 1 for yes, you could comment 2 for no, or 3 for I want to. Because I'm curious if people have heard about this, because a lot of people hear like, oh, there's like OpenAI, and I like use an OpenAI key through like an API. You might be using like Anthropic's Claude, and then you use your API key through that, or Perplexity. And what's kind of interesting with Amazon Bedrock is that it's this like big library of AI models that you can tap into and use. So there's like some 30 plus different models, and it's kind of wild because when you think about just like, oh, like using ChatGPT 4 or like 3.5 Turbo or whatever, then like you use Bedrock, and then now you have access to like 30 models, but some of them are made by Anthropic, some of them are made by Amazon. I think some of them are made by AI 21 Labs. Like they just released Jamba. I want to say like about a few weeks ago. So all these companies are building all these models very regularly. Like you have Meta's Llama 3.2 that just came out, and before they had like Llama 2. So there's a ton of different models that you can see. Um, but yeah, I was kind of curious. Daniel, are you able to like monitor the chat just in case like people like pop in and like message something? I think I'm in the right spot because I see the comments coming in, but I'm not sure. You can let me know if I miss something. But yeah. And then in terms of Bedrock, I was also curious how many people are playing around with it, because and I can kind of show you in the console. I'll get this up on AWS just to show you. So if we go to Bedrock, and I hope I'm still able. Okay, you can see that. Okay, cool. So I want to show all of the different models that are there. So oh yeah, we can like exit out of that. So like, you can see like all these like models are being legacied so quickly, and they're being replaced by new models. So if you go to Amazon Bedrock and you haven't used this before, you'll basically need to like request access, which I think there's like a button up at the top, and then you'll have access to all these things. So you have access to Claude, you have access to Haiku, Sonnet, Opus, Sonnet. These are kind of all the different Anthropic models. Scroll down, you can see models by Cohere. So they have Light, R, Basic, Cohere. There's also like an embedding model. Jamba, that's the new AI 21 Labs that just got released. So you have Instruct, Mini, Large. And then Jurassic, you have Llama 2 from Meta, Llama 3, which just came out, and Llama 3.2, which is like the latest version. You have from Minstrel AI, you have all these different ones. So that's what's really cool about this. Yeah, and these are the Titan models I was talking about earlier. So what's kind of cool is that you could just like start using all these AI models just like right off the bat. And you don't need to, like work at a specific company to like get access to this stuff. Like it's all like very accessible. And we're going to talk about why you might want to go this approach in a little bit. And then I was also curious for people what their experience has been with Gen AI so far. Are we like using Gen AI to learn new things or solve problems? So for me, like I was thinking about how I do, like I use LLMs a lot with like debugging, or if there's like a new system I'm trying to build, like I'll try to go to an LLM first, ask questions, and then have that guide what I do. Or maybe at least give me some context of what to do, what to look out for, what to avoid. Not saying that this is a complete replacement, for a developer or, a senior engineer or something like that, but it is really helpful to give, at least to have somebody as like a pair programming buddy. And something that I've been also using a lot in VS Code is Amazon Q. So like what's kind of cool about that is like instead of needing to like copy code, put that into an LLM, wait for it to ask questions, you can like write code and then have it directly be like asking an LLM like right in your VS Code. So you don't need to go anywhere. And I do like that because I've used um, Amazon Q for writing different IAM policies. So that's something that we're going to get to in a little bit. But for IAM, that's something that I think is always very confusing for anybody, or if you're writing CloudFormation templates, that's also something that can be confusing. So when you're able to just write to Amazon Q and then have it get back to you, I think that that's amazing. So I definitely use it to learn new things and solve problems. But question and answer is also really good. Like, I have this issue, or I have this question. What's the best approach, or why might this be happening? Making images and media, I think that that's also a very cool use case for GenAI. And then, of course, like all of the things, like I'm definitely trying to do all of the things, but I think a lot of other people too are just trying to test the limits of this GenAI thing and see what it can do. And I was also kind of curious with what challenges people have or they come across when they're working with GenAI. So sometimes for that might be like understanding the documentation. So a lot of these services are being built so quickly that you just like don't you like can't keep up. It's really hard, or it takes a lot of energy, time, and effort to keep up. Also, with the lack of tutorials, that can also impact how we build things, because oftentimes when we're trying to build something, it's helpful to sort of be like, oh, there's this example use case, or oh, like I'd be able to work with like this specific implementation. But if there's no examples to explain that, it can make it very confusing. And then you might not know like what to do. So you might try to go to a Slack channel or Discord or a forum online or Stack Overflow and try to find it. And if it's new, chances are these LLMs don't have any context around how it could work. So sometimes we just might be up, the creek without a paddle, and then we like don't really know like how to advance. Also cost and budget. This is definitely something I'm going to be talking about in a quick second. But also for just in general, the cost for managing and deploying these models can be very, very, very expensive. And you'll see an example of what I mean by that in a couple slides. But that's why like the serverless approach, in my opinion, is hands down amazing. It's really great to be able to just pull like the model and then use it, but you don't need to worry about managing the infrastructure or the back end or any of the like the deployment costs. Especially as these models get updated a lot, you don't want to be, having to configure a whole bunch of stuff. And then be updating it. And then if something gets deprecated, now your deployment needs to be, terminated and then re-updated. So just a lot of things that can come up like that. And then also identifying product market fit. That also can be something. I know there's a lot of startups that are they're kind of doing like a ChatGPT wrapper or like an LLM wrapper, and they're providing a use case, but they're using an AI or an LLM in the background, which I think is like an amazing use case for AI. But sometimes it can be very difficult to basically like find pricing for your product, or also being able to build something that fills and substantiates needs. So I think that's also something that I'm finding a lot of people are having a challenge with. And then if you have also other concerns, feel free to comment below. Oh, and I see something from Daryl IR. In my company, oh yeah, thanks, Danielle. In my company, most concerns are around data and companies who offer tooling being able to use our proprietary data or our customers' proprietary data for their own purposes. Yes, that is a really, really, really topical problem. I'm really glad you brought that up, because a lot of what I've noticed with these LLM companies is that they sort of have like this base package that you can, use an API key for, or, subscribe to or whatever. But then it's like they could use your data when you make calls. So anytime that you send a prompt to that LLM or to that company, they may or may not, but like chances are they probably are using that data to then retrain the next iterations of their model. So it becomes really interesting, because it's like on the one hand, you want to leverage all of this tech, but on the other hand, it's like, I don't want to jeopardize my customers' data, my company's information, our business's IP. So one of the great things about Amazon Bedrock is that that data does not go back to the company. So that's something that I think is really interesting, because if you did want to implement like an AI, I know from like with the OpenAI models, you'll have to buy one of those like business licenses, which are not cheap. But a lot of the companies offer those types of business tiers. And OpenAI isn't the only one that does this. Like I'm pretty sure Anthropic also has their own business tier, and like all these other companies also have their own. But what's great about Amazon Bedrock is that you would be able to just access all of these models, and then you don't need to actually worry about that data. So Amazon does, I think, a great job of making sure that when you use these models, that your data, isn't being jeopardized or being compromised. And of course, I think it would be like a good use case to also reach out to your Amazon account rep, also reach out to the company you're working with the LLM, and make sure that your concerns around that data are in line with your data protection policy. Because sometimes, like certain data, you never know. Like, I think it's better to ask those questions and then to find out later and then be like, oh, we were using your data all along. So really great point. Thank you so much for commenting on that. And I see another comment about, yes. Oh, thanks, Daniel. So David said, unpredictability, you can ask the same question twice and get two different answers, one right and one wrong answer. 100%. There is a very cool package from NVIDIA called Guardrails that I've used in several different products and scripts that can help to create those guardrails. But one of the, and I do think that it can be very helpful also against like prompt like jacking or like prompt hijacking. Basically, like you're trying to like inject either like bad data into the prompt so that like a model could get retrained, or you're trying to like confuse the LLM or like get information out of it, or like kind of spoof and like see if you can get information access to like the back end. So that's where guardrails become really important. But also on the unpredictability side, that's sometimes where like LLMs are sometimes just not the right fit. So if you're working on like an actual ML model, like you're building your own, that's something where like if you're categorizing, that's like the task is like it's either like A or B. You really want to know and have that like kind of set to a quantitative number as opposed to like an LLM, which I always feel like LLMs are creative outputs. You could in your prompt give it a number and basically say like you kind of give it a rubric. And I think that's one of the ways that like I think is sort of creative of how you can get around unpredictability is like have a heavily templated prompt, and then you make a rubric and you basically have to have it pass through each of the points, and you try to make them as like specific as possible so that there might be no ambiguity. And as you kind of move through those that rubric, it's going to be scoring. Also, sometimes LLMs aren't the best at counting, so you also do have to be on the lookout for that. But if you're like asking and there's maybe like 10 questions or 20 questions or something like that, and you have it go through all of them based upon what you ask it, that is a way where you might be able to get close to a quantitative number, which then could help you delineate right versus wrong. But yeah, David, to your point, like the unpredictability can be a challenge, and especially if you're trying to replicate, basically like ask similar or same questions or prompts. Sometimes it will be different. So we always do have to be on the lookout for that, and sometimes LLMs just aren't the right solution. But I think the AI models, which I'll show some examples of Amazon Bedrock in a second. But I think the models are going to get smarter and they're going to get better. But I do think also I heavily recommend people also make sure that is this an LLM question or is this a script question, or do we need to make our own model and deploy that? So also sometimes like you don't need AI. Like I think sometimes it's like you don't need to inject AI into everything. Sometimes it's literally just like, is this true? If it's not, do this, otherwise do that. But yeah, but unpredictability. Yeah, thanks so much, David. That was a great comment as well. But yeah, thanks for participating. This is great. So what are some challenges? We kind of talked about this before, but managing an AI on your own is really expensive. In the next slide, we're going to actually see like what I'm talking about there. But yeah, it's just the actual model deployments are quite costly. It's not exactly to call an LLM or like to execute it. Like it's very fast, but that's because you need like a huge engine to run it. And this was something that was very interesting to me because I did a YouTube tutorial about a year back and I showed how to deploy Llama 2 to Amazon SageMaker. And it got a lot of really positive feedback, but I was surprised at how expensive it was. And that wasn't even like the latest model with like even more stuff. So when you have these models that are like, they have a lot of data, they have, like those X billions of parameters, that's where you're building like so much data packed into the model. And then you need to store that somewhere. So it needs to basically live somewhere and then be in a readily accessible oven that you can then like start making food from at any time. Otherwise, so there's like the pattern where you could deploy it and then it's instantly available, but you're going to be burning a lot of costs. You could also do async inference, and async inference is where like something would like you would have a model and it would like warm up to run, execute, and then it would spin down. But with a lot of these LLMs, like could you imagine if you were using like a Chat GPT or an Amazon Bedrock or Anthropic Claude, and you had to wait like I don't know, like 10, 20 seconds for it to like spin up every time you ask a question? Like that would be insane. So we definitely don't want to do that. And that's where the model costs are going to come from somewhere. So these companies are bearing the costs, but they can be pretty staggering, which I'll show you in a second. And then running systems that depend on GPUs, this is something that they require a lot of very expensive hardware. So that's not even necessarily just like a very big model. Like if you're building a big container or you're building, a big software package, GPUs need very specialized systems to run. Like I was looking at CUDA and Pandas, like running that like with NVIDIA hardware, and those things they can't just run in like a normal server or like a normal Lambda function. So that's where if you're depending on GPUs or like you think you might, not only like do you need specialized hardware, but that also will be much more expensive than just regular available CPU servers. And then as soon as we learn something new, I always feel like there's some new hot or disruptive trend that comes up. So that's maybe a little bit more of a hot take from my perspective, but I just feel like as soon as we learn something, like I remember when like LangChain came out, then like Llama Index comes out, and then they're each like shipping different types of tooling, and then we like RAG, and if you're not familiar with RAG, that's retrieval augmented generation. It's like how you could support a prompt getting data and then like putting that into a model. So a lot of these LLMs might be trained up to a certain date, but then if you wanted to pass in new data about recent events, you might want to put that into like a RAG type pipeline, so that like if it asks questions about something that is new, it might pull it from this other database of vectors and then like pass that into the prompt, and then the LLM can answer it with the new context. But then like now RAG is now not the best approach because a lot of these context windows are like expanding, so you can actually pass like a lot more data in, and sometimes the way in which you might get like tokens, like via like vectors via token, like sometimes that might not be the best approach. So what you might want to do instead is just like retrain a model, as expensive as that might be, to then get more and more data if you're able to do that fast. But also sometimes like RAG might be a better approach if you're trying to cut costs. But anyway, there's just like a lot of stuff that's happening all the time, as I'm sure you all could recognize. So I want to see if I can like. Oh, okay, cool. Okay, now it's like full screen. I just want to see if I could do that. Cool. So when I talked about cost before, I just wanted to show you just like an example of what it can look like in terms of these costs. So I had deployed, this was Llama 2. You could see this is about a year ago. And this is the emails that I got from AWS's cost anomaly detection service. So if you don't have that enabled, you should definitely enable anomaly detection under your AWS account. This is like if something's going wrong, like it's like you're being billed like 600% more or like 100% more than you usually do. This will spike, and then this will like send you emails to be like, hey, there's this list of anomalies. Check this out. So I had never deployed. Oh, thanks for sharing the link. Yeah. So that's for the cost anomaly detection. So that's in 100% like set up AWS budgets, cost explorer, like set up everything that you can related to cost, because you do not want to get hit with a crazy bill like this. But it gets crazier. But anyways, just bear with me for a second. So I deployed Llama 2 because I wanted to, like test how to deploy an LLM if I wasn't doing it in a serverless way. And I think this is like helpful for anybody if like there's a new model that comes out and Amazon Bedrock or these other companies like might not support your ability to use that model. But it's in a Hugging Face deep learning container or somewhere on Hugging Face that you could pull from. Then you could go ham and deploy it. So I was like more using it as like an experimentation. So I deploy it, and then it took a lot of work to get that up because I was learning it for the first time. But then once I got it, I was like, okay, this is great. I now have this endpoint and it's fast. Like I can, run it kind of like, a chat GPT or an Amazon Bedrock, which is cool. So I then get an email a day later, and then it says, hey, your max daily impact is $165.36. And that's your total impact. I was thinking like, okay, like not ideal, but like I have credits. So like this is where like I'm experimenting. So like that's fine. And then I get an email the next day and now it's $172. So the max daily impact had actually increased because it also is getting more used and also like the cost is like probably evening out. And now the total impact after 2 days is $338.28. I get another email after 3 days, it's now half $1,000. So then I'm thinking, okay, like yikes, yikes, not great. I did have like credits like to use for this. So like that was kind of my like learning budget. And they were like going to expire soon. So I was like, I can use this. But then I also was traveling. I think I was on the West Coast at the time. So I was like not in a place where I could like easily like spin this up because I think I was traveling and then I was like at events or something like that. So I like wasn't able to like spin this down until I got back. So this was running for like a few more days, I think, after that, because I did want to see like what ended up happening. But I think this is just important to see kind of the costs. So let's say like what the damage of that is. So $508 in 3 days. Let's say that there's 30 days in a month. So we'll times that by 10 for like 10 times 30 for 30 days. So that's gonna be $5,000, $5,080 per month. We multiply that by 12 for 12 months in a year. You're looking at like $60,000, which is like, I don't know, like the cost of maybe like one or like two employees. Like that's a lot of money. And especially for running just one model. This isn't running like all the different models. This was just running Llama 2 at the time. So to think that it could be expensive like this, that was a big awakening for me to think like, okay, I might not want to be deploying these models. Again, really good to know how to use SageMaker because I use SageMaker like weekly, like very regularly. So it's a great service if you need to get like really into the data science, data engineering weeds of working with AI and ML. If you need to do something with GPUs, like SageMaker is a great suite and toolkit to do that. But I do say this as a cautionary tale of like really make sure that if you deploy something, specifically an LLM that's huge, you understand that the underlying infrastructure for this is very expensive. So I'm gonna go out of full screen for a second. Am I still? Oh, I'm still sharing screen. Great. Okay. So the overall idea of this though is that somebody's paying for this. So if we, the developers, aren't paying for this, there's a company that's paying for it. So that's also something where I know it's also been a concern, just to go back to like the concerns around this, is that if a company was to like deprecate their AI models that are available, then like you might not be able to have a product. So if you like built a model or like a product around a specific model that a company built, then kind of like how do you navigate that if they like deprecate that AI stuff? So costs are a really important thing about. But there is a ton of hype right now, and there's a lot of investors that are also like really interested in the space. So if you're trying to build, a startup, really great opportunities there. And you can also learn very hireable skills. So working with LLMs, working with data, working with API endpoints, building serverless architectures, and if it's like semi-serverless containerized, like that's also cool too. But these are how cloud skills work, right? Like if you're able to build with these AI tools, and I know it's kind of like hyped up, so everyone's like maybe a little bit AI'd out. But I do think though that if you're able to show that you can like learn a lot of stuff, like I've had a lot of people that are asking like, what are the best ways to get jobs in the space right now? And I think that showing that you can build AI skills is huge because it also shows that you're scrappy, that you're resourceful, that you're excited to learn things. And if you're also looking to level up, in your current position or you want to move up to a different, company, but like increase your role and your responsibilities, knowing how to do a lot of this AI stuff extends into many different areas. So if you're working with data, if you're working with caching, if you're working with authentication, if you're working, again, I talked about like API endpoints, but being able to also deploy and like build things into production I think these are really important skills to know. So before we get started with unlocking AI, one of the things I do think is really, really important is to set up IAM Identity Center. I'm just going to move this up a little bit. So there's like different ways that you can work with different roles. Like basically, like IAM is the language for how permissions work in AWS. So if you have an application and you want to invoke an API, like let's say it's a private API, you're going to need to make like a trust relationship between like a specific way in which the application can call this API endpoint. Otherwise, like no one else could call it. So a good example of this too would be like if you were deploying an application and you built your static code and you package it all up and you put it on the web. You might put that in an S3 bucket, but you don't want that S3 bucket to be accessible to like the public. It's going to be like a lockdown bucket. So you'll make a like you'll probably use CloudFront as a content distribution network, a CDN, to authenticate access to that bucket so that if people ping, www.mywebsite.com, that's able to access the deployed code that's in that S3 bucket. But otherwise, you wouldn't be able to access that code. So that's where like IAM becomes really helpful because it helps to make sure that all of our permissions are permissioning. But when you're building a lot with this AI stuff, again, we also want to manage costs. We also want to do time limited things. So you could create a user and then create a key so that if you have an IAM user that has access to all of the models in Amazon Bedrock, then you'd be able to just go and do that. But if you don't, if you don't basically like if you make this key, like it's accessible forever until you delete it. Um, if we don't want to do that, we could use IAM Identity Center. So this is a really great way where we're able to then get, and you can probably see this here, but you get a key, you get an access key, and you get a session token. This is a very like fantastic way to basically like provision how many permissions we have for a given scope. So if you're like writing a script with Amazon Bedrock, for example, and you want to like write something with Python and you're just experimenting, what you can do is that if you have IAM Identity Center set up, and also on the Tech Stack Playbook, I do have a YouTube channel that explains to you how to set this up. So if you are curious about IAM Identity Center, definitely check that out. But what's really important about this is that you can like create these temporary credentials, but you don't need to think about it. But it will create this basically this scope that you can then put into your environment. And then when you run your Python code, it's already in the environment. And then those will expire after a certain period of time. So it could be like 4 hours, it could be 8 hours, depending on what your admin or you set for the expiry for IAM Identity Center credentials. But that's something that's like super, super important because then you don't need to worry about like if a script was just left, like if you're sharing this code with somebody and I don't know, it was like left open to the public. Like every time that they ran your script, it could run, and then they could run up your bill. So if you were ever like, and obviously you wouldn't want to have just code just accessible to the public, but like if it was, this will expire after a certain period of time. So then after 4 hours or 8 hours, it won't work anymore. And basically the IAM will deny calls to those services that you're rendering or trying to call, which is great. And then also just like secrets manager, like if you're working with keys or you are working with any of these like credentials, you can always use AWS Secrets Manager to provision access to, specific what's the term to like specific API keys if that's of interest or a need. And there'll be sometimes where like you're working with like I know like Langsmith or like any of these other vector stores like MongoDB Atlas or something like that. So if you're like working with those other keys, you want to put those in Secrets Manager. And then like as you work with your scripts, as you work with your CI/CD pipelines, you can just like throw in those variables, but you don't need to like hard code them every time. So it keeps just that layer of permission away. And you could also use Secrets Manager in your IAM so that only certain scripts could call certain secrets or vice versa. So that's a lot of stuff. But to get set up, like I definitely think like thinking about how you're provisioning access to this, because if you just create like administer access, that could be fine for like testing. But if you're building developments like environments, if you're testing stuff, if you're sharing this with other team members, you probably want to have more like parsed down permissions. Okay. So what does an anatomy of a Gen AI app look like? So obviously we talked about Amazon Bedrock, but like how would we work with that? So authentication, I've used Cognito and Okta and Auth0. Auth0 is a product of Okta, just like for context, but they also have something called Okta, which is kind of the same thing but a little different. But in terms of authentication, 120%, make sure that you have all of your calls with authentication. The reason why we want to do that is so if you're using like Gen AI in production and anybody can call it, that's something where like you're going to be bearing the costs of those types of things. So I could even show you, like, I think on the documentation, this this will come up. Be helpful if I copied the URL. Okay, cool. So if we open up Amazon Q, yeah. So like this is an example where if you like have a chatbot that's open to the public and then you like ask a question, like what is Amazon Bedrock? So like as you're making these, this is probably like hitting some LLM in the background and then like passing data back. Hopefully. There we go. Okay, cool. I was like, is it working? But yeah, so like this is gonna get data and then it's gonna stream the information back. So, kind of like what you might think about. And maybe this information also some of it might be cached, so that might be cutting down on LLM load. But if we think about this though, like if you do have if budget is like a cost of concern or an area of concern, you want to make sure that you limit like who could access that. So that's where like authentication, also using a database. So like if someone's on a specific like plan, like they're paying for like a specific thing, you'd be able to like check, hey, they're a user and they're in this plan. Great. Allow them to access with this, API key that you use for, your application. In terms of compute, love Lambda. We love Lambda. Lambda is really great because it integrates specifically with Boto 3, which is like the Python, basically like package for calling AWS services. But if you do want to use containers, or you need to do this, or you need to use GPUs or something like that, that's where I would be looking at Amazon ECS slash Fargate, or the Elastic Kubernetes service. So this is the Elastic Container Service, Elastic Kubernetes Service. These are kind of like serverless ways to work with containers or Kubernetes. You might find that you're able to containerize your Lambda functions, and that's fine. But if you do need a more like containerized approach, that's where ECS as a container orchestrator is awesome, because it is a serverless way to manage your containers as opposed to needing to do this all manually. Same thing with EKS. So that's helping you manage your Kubernetes cluster, but in a way that is scalable and automatic, as opposed to needing to, do a lot of that stuff manually. Same thing with hosting. So if you're building an application, you could use Amplify Hosting. I think Amplify Hosting is really great. There's also you could do CloudFront plus S3. You can also do Netlify. But these are different ways to just deploy your application. I do think though that Amplify Hosting is super underrated. I highly recommend this for testing. There might be some times where like you actually do need to like do a lot of stuff that I don't know, Amplify might not necessarily support, like web application firewalls, or putting something inside of a private VPC. So that's where you might want to deploy with EKS. But again, that might be overkill based upon what you're trying to build. Front end, I almost exclusively build with Next.js and TypeScript now. I know some people have used Streamlit as a way to build apps, but I have not used Streamlit in an AWS context. So I can only speak to building apps with React or Next.js, which Next.js is like a kind of like a more advanced form of React. But yeah, it's Next.js, TypeScript, really great. I've also used Angular and Vue, but Next.js and TypeScript, love it. And then for storage, you might be storing data in S3. That could be like images. Like if you're generating images with AI, you might want to store those in a bucket and then allow users to like call that. So whenever you like generate an image, that might be stored in an S3 bucket that only a conversation can access. And if you're accessible to that conversation, then you can access that image via a pre-signed URL. Otherwise, you might not be able to access it. But object storage is really important for that. And databases. I'm very partial to DynamoDB. I really like the NoSQL database. I think it's super fast. Also, very, very, very inexpensive. And this is really great because if you're storing messages, or you're storing data that are prompts, or specifically like responses from LLMs that a user calls, you could just store that very quickly and easily in DynamoDB. If you do want to go the SQL route, Amazon RDS is a great option as well. Although the cost for RDS, like DynamoDB, is like pennies of pennies on the dollar for these managed instances for a relational database. So you might just want to think about that of how could I store data there. There's also now more support for those vector databases. So if you're storing embeddings, kind of like if you're doing the RAG approach like I talked about earlier, you might want to store it there. And then also caching. So I've checked out Memento and Redis, and I've used those both in different applications, and both are amazing. They're really great. And I think caching is also really great if you want to basically protect how your LLM is getting hit, or basically to make sure you're not running excessive generations if it's the same question. So like if a user asked a question, you might want to store the response for that, because if other people are asking that same question, you could then like return the answer. And that's really important to think about if the data isn't changing. So if you had like a news application, and it was asking about like a piece of news that was published, like the answer for that theoretically would be the same. But like, let's say that, I don't know, a service got deprecated. If the news announcement was like, this service is amazing because it does blah 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 blah, and it is like the most cutting edge tech, that would be outdated, because then like someone would be like, oh, they actually like don't have this service anymore or this model anymore. So that's where you just have to think about how often are you fetching new data to store in the cache. And then payment processing. Our applications need to make money, otherwise we won't be able to maintain them, unless we get sponsors, but we probably need to do that. So Stripe is a really great way to implement basically payment processing for your applications. So I wanted to show just a couple different examples of what serverless could look like in an application. So I was building this document analysis tool last year, mainly to just like learn how to work with documents and kind of build some internal tech with TechStack Playbook for just basically like some different things that I've been working with. So when we think about this, the user will be here. We'll have like our Next.js TypeScript app. I use style components for a lot of my front end, so that's the logo for that, if you're not familiar. So basically, like, we'll use AWS Amplify to host our application. So when we deploy our code, it lives there and it's managed by Amplify. We'll use Cognito to manage authentication. And this is to make sure that only authenticated users would be able to access any of these other systems downstream. So when a user uploads a file to be analyzed, the file is going to go basically into a Lambda function, and that file is going to go into S3, and then the Lambda function is then going to basically parse over the document, and it's going to do two things. It's going to, first of all, summarize the document. So we're using Python, we're using LangChain, and we're using Amazon Bedrock, and it's basically going to be taking all the context of the document up until like the character limit. But usually the character limits are huge now, so there's not really like a huge concern for that. There was a confusion about that, or concern for that last year, and that's kind of where like the LangChain kind of came in for like kind of like token management and those types of things. But anywho, so first of all, doing summarization and then storing the summary of that document, and then doing vectorization, so that if you wanted to like talk to your documents, the vectorization of that goes to MongoDB Atlas, and then you get your embeddings here, so that if you ever needed to like talk to your document, you'd be able to like use MongoDB Atlas vector search, and then basically source the information from that document. And then basically like you'd be able to get the file details and the embeddings also like for each user. So as you like start storing documents, you want to like switch between different documents, you'd be able to then go and do that. And the reason why I use Lambda here was because it's basically that spin up, spin down. So anytime that a user is, asking questions about a document, spin up, really quickly this server, have it reach out to MongoDB Atlas, use vector search, get the data, come back, and then pass that back to the user. If the user is uploading a file, manage all these things with Boto3, S3, all that stuff, pass it back. And I learned a lot from this project, and I feel like I definitely recommend anybody that's interested in trying to build with GenAI to like try to build a document analysis tool. I feel like I've seen a lot of tutorials, of course, from the AWS, the build on AWS channel. I've also seen DataStax doing a lot of tutorials and live streaming those. I've also seen, of course, Believe in Serverless. I've seen all of your streams as well. CloudFix has done a lot of stuff with building like document analysis tools, and also Single Store. They also have a way to like deploy that to AWS as well. But yeah, a lot of those companies have great tutorials about document analysis, and I think you'll learn a lot from building a pipeline like this, as well as like why you would want to use an LLM. Because think about like if you're trying to build, like a document search tool, you could just put in, what do you call it? You could like put in like Control F and like search for something. But what was really cool was being able to like search through a document and be like, tell me the population of London at like this specific time, and then it would like go through the document and like find that specific point in there, and then like return it to you, which was like pretty cool because it saves you probably a lot of time. And I just think also like you get to learn about a lot of how to put together a serverless workflow. So that's that. And then another thing that I built, I actually was talking about this at AWS Reinforce earlier this year. But what's kind of cool is that there's this service called Amazon Code Guru that allows you to parse over commits, and then it'll analyze your code. It'll let you know what's wrong with it. I want to see if I can just go big screen again. Oh, I don't think that actually helped. But maybe it did. Maybe it didn't. But in terms of like total findings here, so you could see basically like critical, high, medium, low of your commits. So that's where you can start building in CI/CD pipeline AI code analysis so that you're able to do this. And this is completely serverlessly. Like you just implement this into basically like your repo via an OpenID connect. It creates an IAM role, and then that has a thumbprint that can access your repo. And you just think about that, like you'll need to have a specific IAM role per Amazon Code Guru use case, like per repo. So just keep that in mind. Like you wouldn't be able to use like the same IAM role like for different repos unless you allowed that. You would probably want to keep them separate. But Code Guru is awesome because if you wanted to like make sure that your code was all basically like secure and fine, you could make it where like it has to run this before you're able to approve and commit that. The other use case that I think for AWS Lambda that would be really interesting for people is that, let's say that like Code Guru wasn't enough, or you wanted to have a specific type of check over a file or specific files, or maybe even like if a certain developer like committed something, maybe you might want to make sure that certain procedures are checked, like in certain standards or something like that. So what you could do is that like you could basically write your logic in AWS Lambda, it's like in Python. You could then like like in one of the workflow rules, you could make it where like it hits a Lambda function, it throws the code in there, it then asks Amazon Bedrock, hey, like what do you think about this? And it'll run through all that stuff, use Amazon Bedrock, pass back. If everything's good, then you could deploy your CloudFormation template and then be on your merry way. But I do think that that's like a really great way to help to sort of see how serverless doesn't necessarily just need to be Lambda, but it can be like the implementation of these other serverless tools. And code scanning is also like really important. I didn't realize like how important it was until I started shipping a lot of things in production, and then you have security kind of being like, why don't you check this, or like, why is this not there? So if you just had this check kind of from the beginning, it just like saves everybody else's time, and like probably will make your security team like your code a little bit more, making sure that you already are factoring that into your implementation. So that's that. I know some people also like to know like how to design, and I feel like designing and architecting an idea first before you start building, really important. This is the link for the architecture icons that I was sharing earlier. Canva is a great way. Like you could use Google Slides or Microsoft PowerPoint or whatever, but Canva is a great free resource for development or like of your architecture diagrams. Also draw.io, which like unironically links to app.diagrams.net, but like yes, they're the same thing. I spent like an hour probably when I like first learned about draw.io. Like I thought draw.io was like something separate, but draw.io redirects to app.diagrams.net. They're the same thing. And then Google Slides, keeping it simple. That's like a great use case. I did just want to, I don't know how we're doing on time, Daniel, but I wanted to just like go through some of these some of the models like in Amazon Bedrock, but I don't know if we have like enough time for it. We could kind of like check it out if that's cool. Okay, cool. I didn't hear a no, so that we're gonna go with it. Okay, so I want to show some of the examples here. So if some of you are familiar with like Zoom, obviously like like we all probably use Zoom, but like the Zoom actions. So with AI, if you take a transcript, you might be able to take a transcript from Zoom, and then like Zoom does its AI magic and then says like, hey, like here's the actions out of the meeting. Here's what, Joey's supposed to do, and Sally's supposed to do, and Bethany's supposed to do, and Roger's supposed to do, and all these people. But what's really cool is that what if you could like do that on your own? So that's kind of where like these serverless tools from Bedrock become really powerful, because you could probably save yourself like tons of money. But also like you can build your own software so that you're not dependent or beholden to a specific company. So this is the Amazon Text G1 Express Titan model. And what's really cool about this is that given this transcript, it will then like take actions. And that's something where like we could like open this in the playground. So like let's say if we run this. So like meeting transcript, we want to discuss the work stream for a new product launch. This looks basically like what you might see a transcript from like Google Meet or Zoom or Loom or whatever. So if you did run, this is then going to use this Titan model from Amazon to then take, and then it'll say actions for Miguel, document other concerns, actions for Brant, work with James from another team, actions for Anamita, work on this. So you could think about like how quickly this ran, and then like you take a transcript. So like let's say this transcript was like much longer. That's where like these AI models, like they're already pre-trained, they're already customized, and response like over 4,000 tokens. So that's where you could throw in a huge transcript and then get back some sizable actions, which I think is really cool. You can also go back. Ooh, not that far back. All right, let's go back here. So try to find like a cooler one. So you can like build a website. Yeah, I think that might be a newer one. Career coach. So that's where like if you wanted to like build like a coaching bot or something like that. They already have these models that already have examples, and Claude 3 Haiku is already like trained with a prompt to like explain that. So you're acting as an AI career coach with all these types of things. I think this is a great way to get started building a GenAI application. And then it's like already taking on a persona, which I think is really cool. And then it'll basically just tell you like, hey, this is Joe, your career coach. And then, shifting to this. First, I'd suggest blah, 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 and that type of stuff. So if you did want to start working with these models, like I want to use Claude. So it shows all these different examples of how to do that. It has like data extraction with JSON outputs. I think that this would be a really great way to, when we're talking about like unlocking AI, like there's so much that's already in Bedrock that you can start working with. And then it talks about the model ID, the model ARN. This becomes very important if you are building that IAM policy, like we were talking about earlier. So if you want to allow, your script to only access certain models, you'd make sure that this model ARN is referenced in the IAM so that only this model is accessible or other ones. But then it also shows the API request. And then same thing here. And I want to see where there was like some code examples, which I thought were like right here. Oh no. Yeah, I thought it was right here. But maybe not. I think it probably is just in the documentation. So if you go to this, and you go to API reference, Yeah, so like when you think about like CLI commands, get model invocation job. So when we are taking this, so this is kind of like the context for this. There was in Bedrock some code examples. I just want to see if I can find that really quick. Because I have references to these, but I think I must have them in my Python scripts and not in the console. Yeah, but anyways, like this would just be like invoking Boto 3. Yeah, I thought that you'd be able to access the code for this from this page, but I don't think that it's here. Yeah, I don't think it's here. I will try to find it, and then I will share it in the live stream or the link. But anywho, if you're able to like kind of check out the like the examples from here, this will sort of give you context about which about how to call the API endpoints. But basically, like you need to have an IAM role that can assume the model that you're trying to call, which specific model you want to have access to. Oh, here we go. Okay. It's under examples, and then if you scroll down, this is what I was looking for. Okay, so this is like specific to each model, but this will give you a lot of context about like how to call it either with the CLI or with Python. So Boto 3 core exceptions. You create a Boto 3 client to access Bedrock runtime, and then you set the model ID, and then you're basically using that, and then you'll do a try accept, and then the response is you're using that Boto 3 client specifically with the context that you want, and then is basically converse, or like that's like the method to like talk to the model, and then you extract the response, or otherwise give an error. So this is a great strategy, I think, to learn Amazon Bedrock like very quickly, because what you need to do is just put this in a Lambda function, invoke that Lambda function, get a response back, and then do that. One other cool thing that I think is awesome is that if you wanted to do streaming, I believe Amazon Bedrock now has this as like an abstraction. It's like model streaming or something like that. But if you wanted to do streaming with a Lambda function, you can use the function URL, and then you basically just like invoke the function URL, and then it'll pass back the streaming stuff. So that's kind of where like I think people like, you don't want to like wait many seconds and then you get like the whole chunk back. So if you're able to like get the chunks back, that's how you do that with a function URL. And then as the Lambda function is running, it's passing that data back. So you're running the Lambda function, but then it's the function URL, and then that's invocable, via an API and like API gateway or something like that. And then you're able to like wait for the data to come back over time and then pass back. But yeah, so check out examples and then scroll all the way down, and then you can see Python and CLI for how to access that. Okay, so I think we're like just about at time, but hopefully, you all are excited about building with Gen AI, or like somewhat excited, and hopefully not like OMG, not more AI, but maybe some of us might be a little bit AI'd out. But I do think that there's a ton of really cool and rich opportunities to just like learn how to build, and like test your skills and like dive into a lot of these new frameworks and workflows. Um, but yeah, but I'm also curious if there's other questions. I'm like happy to stick around for a little bit more to answer questions if anybody has them. But yeah, thanks for attending my talk. And hope to do this again sometime soon with like maybe like some more like actual code demos, because I think like this stuff I'm still working on like an actual framework that I like, that like is kind of cool and replicatable. I have stuff that's like internal, but it's like it's like a little bit wonky. Like I'm trying to optimize it more, but it could be kind of cool to like show that in like a real working setting. And same thing with this. Sometimes it's like internal tools are like functional, but they're not like cool to show. So yeah, hopefully maybe we could like do another like coding session and I could show you some more Bedrock stuff. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this group loves code, so
Yes.
we would love to have you back. Yeah, this is a great overview. And yeah, just being able to see it in context would be awesome as well. So yeah, I never heard of Streamlit before. That seems super cool.
Oh yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people like a lot of these LLM stuff, it's all Python, right? So
Mhm.
Streamlit is for the people. I feel like that and maybe they just like don't like front end. Like I could totally understand it's like the AI and the LLM stuff is enough, and people can be like, oh my god, I'm overwhelmed. So Streamlit, you can just like pass in just you kind of like write Python code that becomes like CSS and like HTML and it kind of wraps it. It it kind of reminds me a little bit of Angular. But it's like a very simplified. It's like if Fast API was Angular and then it was trying to build like an application that's like a front end focused one. Um it's also like very similar to like Gradio ish. If you ever like used that like from Hugging Face. Or I think Hugging Face acquired Gradio, but anywho, um it's just building those like front ends for working with LLMs. So yeah, if you like don't like CSS and you're like ick front end, which I imagine there's probably a lot of people that might feel that way. But front end is cool. Don't sleep on front end. Front end is how you build apps. We like front end, but Streamlit is a way to abstract the complexity of front end. If you're like, oh my gosh, Brian, like I don't want to learn TypeScript, I don't want to learn React, like check out Streamlit. It's cool. And also something that is interesting, I have used Streamlit with Modal Labs, just as like a kind of cool like hacky project. If anybody's ever like heard of them, but yeah, I've dabbled with like a bunch of these different frameworks, and it's really cool to see how you can build just like different tech with different companies and see how it works. But I feel like I'll test with these different frameworks and then I'll end up going back to my AWS best practices. So definitely like this is like a very like experiment-y field right now. So it's definitely a lot of innovation that's happening, and you can learn a lot from the companies that are building in it. And you can also be a part of it by like, building your own stuff. So if you ever like if anybody's like built something, like please tag me. Like I'd love to see like what other people build that is AI or not AI. But I see a lot of stuff on like YouTube and like Instagram and LinkedIn and stuff. So there's a lot of cool stuff happening. So
Yeah,
like
it
to see
kind
what
of
other people are
feels
building too.
like the earlier days of serverless, before serverless kind of became mature.
Oh, so true. So
So
true.
very
Yeah.
exciting time for a lot of these tools. And yeah, I definitely really appreciated that you acknowledge that sometimes things aren't a fit for LLMs. Um, yeah, I would love to have more of that in this dialogue. Maybe that's why there's like a little bit of AI fatigue. But yeah, definitely exciting stuff. I admittedly have not played with this a lot, so definitely looking forward to digging in quite a bit.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of stuff now. Like I know Stephen Barr from Cloudfix has been doing a lot of stuff with Raul like on their channel too of like implementations of Bedrock. So I'm a huge fan of their channel because it's like they're just like going at it with like Bedrock agents, which is also like a cool implementation. Like if anybody has ChatGPT, you can make like your own agent. And then it's basically just like a repeatable prompt that you can then use. But you could like do that with Amazon Bedrock. Also, knowledge bases are really cool. So, something that I am actually building, which might be topical next time, is taking like so I have like a blog. Um, or no, I don't like have a blog. I have a blog. I definitely have one. And I know that I have one. And what was cool was that I was able to write a script to basically get all of my blogs into a CSV format and then being able to like put that into a database. So if you have a knowledge base, you can like call an LLM that like has access to this Bedrock knowledge base in the back end. And then that's kind of where like, oh, like what does Brian think about AWS? What does Brian think about serverless? you could like it'll go through, your back end like brain in a sense. It's kind of like a second brain of this data. Or like for companies, if you have a lot of internal like Jira tickets or internal, documentation and Notion or something like that, and you store that in a knowledge base, you could then have access to that. So you could have like a chat bot implementation that could just like Q&A out of that information. So that's where I feel like this is coming, because it's like, take the AI buzzword out of it, right? It's like it's helping people solve problems faster. So instead of you needing to parse through like, I don't know, like 50 blog posts or like 20 Jira tickets, or like think about how much time that would take. Um, like that's where like you can use AI to speed that up. And also, I was not able to attend this because this was in a complete different state for me. But Amelia Huff, same last name, cool. We like might be related, which is like kind of cool. There seems to be like some overlap, so maybe we are related. Not quite sure. We need to like dive into ancestry.com more. But anyway, she had a really great talk at AWS at a dev chat. I think this was like the AWS DC summit. She talked about like automating or basically working with Jira tickets, but like using AI and like cool serverless technology to work with that. So that's where I feel like, again, we're taking the AI buzzword out of it. It's just allowing us these very powerful tools and frameworks to work with data and information, just like faster and better. And then think about like, instead of you like pulling your hair out looking at like, I don't know, 30, 50 Jira tickets, or like even like 5, but it's like looking through long comments. If you just had like a way to talk to like your Jira tickets, it could help you like get the information a lot faster, especially if you're like a PM or like a manager of teams and you have to look at a lot of these different, tasks. Me as a developer, like I could barely handle managing the Jira tickets I'm assigned, but like for people that are managing a lot of them, like how do you manage that load? So it's kind of like if you build your own internal tools around that, whether it's AI or not, it can help, people like be a lot more efficient at their jobs. So I see it as a lot of potential for cool tech to help people. Um, oh, that's the blog. Yes. Oh, thank you for
Yeah,
finding that.
it looked like the talk wasn't recorded, or at least I couldn't find it. Maybe I should have used Q for that or something.
Oh, yeah, maybe that'll be next time. But thank you so much
Next
for sharing
time.
that, because that's like, I think that if for people that are interested in seeing what's possible, I would definitely check out blog posts like Amelia's and other builders that are just kind of just like hackily building things together. Like, I talked to her about it, and like the idea for this kind of seemed like it was like a no-brainer. She was like, "Oh, this would be a great way to learn how to build cool tech, and solve a problem." But sometimes like you might not necessarily have a clear problem, but like you might have like a pain, and you're like, I don't know what the solution to this is, but I know that I could probably figure out a way to fix it. So then if you're able to just like, you know, carefully just build something, it's kind of like, as you go along, like you're not trying to like 40 hours a day sprint to get there, but like over time, you're going to learn a ton of stuff, and like you might build something that a company might really appreciate. So the
Yeah, I
world's your
almost wonder
oyster.
if like now that I'm more in management, if it might be cool to be like, here's what I would like to accomplish within the next year. Like, write me a first draft of like a product roadmap. Like that might
Oh,
be kind of neat.
100%. I think that there is a model that product descriptions. About product specs. So this might
Mm.
be something where like you might want to check out like one of these other examples, because like because I think also like with the examples, it's helpful to see like which models are like optimized for like which types of like examples. So and then that's kind of where like you might take that idea and then be like, oh, okay, like I'm gonna test this model because this is like the most likely to be related to like what I want to do. And then Danielle, like you're gonna go and like do your thing and like code all this out. Maybe like you'll have some template examples of like what product roadmap might look like in terms of like it should have a title, it should have a subtitle, it should have like dates that are only 4 quarters if it doesn't go to 5 quarters past. stuff like that. That's where like the Bedrock example library is awesome, because you can also see like what the really smart people like think the model should be used for. Because I'm like, I go in, I'm like overwhelmed. I'm like, I could barely handle like 2 models. Now there's like 40. Like what the heck's going on here? But then it's like you can find out like, okay, like this is really good for image generation. This is really good for actions related to a transcript. Then you're like, okay, mental clarity, moment of focus. Now we can like go and build. But yeah, if you built that, that'd be really cool. I'd love to see that if you end up like going down that path, because I imagine there's a lot of people in management that would want to like know what to do. Like people have ideas, but like
Mhm.
what does an LLM think? Like how could that assist me in making my own decisions? So you have like super smart person brain with super smart LLM brain, and then you like bring them together, and I feel like you get a much better outcome than if you're just like going at it, alone, by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Last call for folks in chat. Did you have any questions? There's usually like a 10-second-ish delay, so I'll just sit here for a little bit. Yeah, this was really awesome. Super
Yeah, thank you
excited
so much for having me.
to check this
This was so
out. And
No,
maybe
I
we'll
had
have
an
you
absolute blast. Like this was so much fun.
around. Awesome. And then you're in our Discord, so if anyone
Yes.
has follow-up questions, feel free to ping him. Is there any other? Oh, yeah, you have it up right up there on the screen. So if you want to contact Brian, definitely do that. He's a good guy to talk to. I've definitely bounced many ideas off of him. So
I do enjoy our chats for sure. But no, I love talking about development stuff, especially like when because Danielle, you've been doing a lot of like speaking and talk. I need to talk to you about a lot of the stuff
mhm.
you've been doing, because I feel like you also are a builder like me, and I like learning from other people that are like on the scene, like learning new stuff and like sharing what they learned. So yeah, I love like talking with people about what they're building, and even as like you build something like as it's progressing, it's cool to see like those types of projects over time. So even if someone's like, I've had like a lot of messages from people talking about like, oh, like I started this project like a year ago and like now it's here, and like I'll get like a little status update like that's so cool, and like crazy stuff. Like one of my colleagues in Berlin is like doing all this AI stuff. And
Hmm.
then like we had like a chat about it. It was like super cool. And then like the next week he like showed me like this other thing he built. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like you built this in a week. He was like, yeah. I'm like, I'm not surprised, but also like, wow. So it's so cool to see other people building things. And
I'd like
yeah.
to
But
see
again,
the
thank you so much for having me on.
process.
This was so
Yeah.
much fun.
Yeah, totally. All right. Yeah, I don't think I see any questions, but Brian will be available for follow-up, and I'm also in the Discord as well. And thank you all so much for joining us. If you are watching this on repeat, thank you for tuning in. Oh, and one other Believe in Serverless business thing. Looks like we have another talk tomorrow morning. Well, morning my time. It's going to be 7:30 a.m. Pacific. I don't know. Yeah, hard for me to do time zone conversions on the fly. But it'll be Mohammed Izzy talking about Apache Flink and serverless in AWS. So pretty stoked for that one. Don't know much about Flink, so we'll all learn together. And I believe he's like an expert in it. So we're really privileged to have such amazing people in this community. So, but anyway, see you all. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks again, Daniel. Thanks everybody. Bye.